Welcome to today's Explainer. We're taking a really fascinating journey together today. We're starting all the way back with ancient symbols carved in stone and bringing it right up to a highly debated modern economic framework. We're going to explore a unique subaltern analysis, which basically means looking at things from the perspective of marginalized voices, and see how it connects our historical ancestry to a proposed structural shift known as the 1090 economic model. It's a brilliant look at how the symbols we worship might actually dictate exactly how our wealth and resources are distributed today.
Okay, let's dive into this. Have you ever actually stopped to wonder about the symbols that define a nation? If you look at modern depictions of Mother India or Bharat Mata, she's almost always fiercely riding a lion. But here is a massive historical mystery for you. If we look back at the Indus Valley civilization, literally one of the oldest and most advanced human societies on the subcontinent, that ultimate symbol of power, the lion, is completely missing. Not a single seal, carving, or terracotta figure depicts a lion or a lion-riding deity. No way, right? It's just not there.
So, what did they focus on instead? Well, when archaeologists unearthed the famous Pashupatinath seal and thousands of other artifacts, the Indus Valley actually chose to highlight the humped bull, the elephant, the tiger, the rhinoceros, and even the mythical unicorn. Now, according to the source analyses, these are all animals that represent agricultural labor, deep ecosystem balance, and coexistence. They were a society fundamentally built on trade and production, so their imagery naturally reflected producer values. The apex predator, the lion, it just didn't fit their worldview at all.
Now you might be wondering, how exactly did the lion get there then? The source traces a really fascinating timeline. Back in 1905, during the Swadeshi movement, Abanindranath Tagore painted Bharat Mata as this peaceful, four-armed ascetic offering food, clothing, and knowledge. Absolutely no weapons and definitely no lion. But fast forward to the 1920s. Facing the immense, violent power of the British Empire, the nationalist movement desperately needed a symbol of fierce, armed resistance. By the 1930s, commercial calendar art had completely merged the mythological lion-riding goddess Durga with the national symbol. So the lion wasn't some ancient historical continuity. It was actually a 20th century political necessity to project dominance.
And that brings us to Section 2. Two models, dominance versus production. According to the analysis, these symbols represent entirely different ways of organizing human society and wealth.
The source analysis actually labels our current global economic system as the lion model. Think about it. In nature, a lion is an apex predator, right? It doesn't produce, it conquers, it controls territory, and it extracts. Historically, this aligns perfectly with a top-down conqueror hierarchy. On the flip side, the bull and elephant model represents that indigenous mindset of the Indus Valley. We're talking immense strength, for sure, but applied to agricultural labor, high intelligence, production, and ecosystem balance. Basically, one model extracts from the bottom to feed the top, while the other produces from the ground up.
To really anchor this producer mindset in the very roots of the subcontinent, the analysis points to Michael Bamshad's pivotal 2001 genetic report. Bamshad's study revealed something incredible. While paternal lineages, the Y-DNA, show waves of outside migration, the maternal DNA, the mtDNA, across virtually all groups is deeply, deeply tied to the ancient indigenous populations of the land. The sources suggest it's this biological reality that shapes the true concept of a shared motherland. It's a land fundamentally built on those early, peaceful producer societies, not the later conquerors.
Now, what's really interesting about this next part is Section 3 systemic reconstruction, focusing on the 1090 framework. Because if the current world operates on that extractive lion model, well, the source proposes a structural way to get back to the producer model.
So let's break down this 1090 economic model by defining its three mathematical pillars. First up, the 10. That represents a 10% direct cash right to citizens, guaranteeing basic financial security to just entirely eradicate immediate poverty. Next, the 90. This represents shifting 90% of natural resource control away from top-tier corporate syndicates and handing it directly back to local producers and indigenous communities. The whole goal here is an absolute shift from just having a political vote on a piece of paper to holding true economic sovereignty.
And then, of course, there's the 0. The framework calls for a strict 0% tolerance for financial exploitation. How? By enforcing a massive 10 times financial penalty. This means a mandatory 10x fine on offshore tax havens, corporate corruption, and illicit resource extraction. It mathematically destroys the profit motive of the lion model by making financial crimes completely economically suicidal.
So how does all this theoretical stuff hold up against our actual current reality? Let's take a look at Section 4, Global Impact, UN Models versus 1090. Let's look at the hard data. Right now, under the current UN models, you've got over 800 million people living in extreme poverty. The 1090 model projects a 95 to 100% eradication of this through that 10% direct cash, right? In terms of resources, currently a tiny fraction of the global top 1% holds a massive monopoly. The new model flips this entirely, projecting 90% control going straight to local producers. And while a staggering $1.3 trillion is lost annually to tax havens today, the 10x penalty rule aims to reduce illegal finance by 90%. It is a really stark contrast between the failing targets we see today and what the source projects as a totally mathematical solution.
The philosophical difference here is just massive. As the source outlines, our current global models are totally reformist and top-down. They rely on voluntary enforcement by the wealthy, tossing out charity, subsidies, and debt to the poor. The 1090 model, it's entirely bottom-up. It's a structural shift that does not ask for charity. It demands zero-tolerance enforcement, and it relies on the actual ownership of resources by the very people who work the land.
And this brilliantly illustrates our final section, the ecological vote. Because, an economic system doesn't just affect human beings. It literally dictates the survival of the entire planet.
The environmental data attributed to this extractive lion model of economics is absolutely devastating. We're talking about 10 million hectares of forest destroyed every single year, between 11 and 14 million tons of plastic just choking our oceans annually. And perhaps most tragically of all, a 69% average decline in global wildlife populations over just the last 50 years. This is the ultimate, literal cost of applying an apex predator mindset to global industry.
Now, the subaltern analysis suggests that the 1090 framework acts as the ultimate ecological safeguard. Think about it. By legally returning 90% of land and water control back to local communities, people whose traditional lifestyles are already aligned with nature, you inherently halt blind corporate extraction. When the producer actually controls the environment, biodiversity restores itself naturally because their survival depends on coexistence, right? Not extraction.
The author of this analysis poses this really beautiful, kind of challenging thought experiment. If nature could vote, which model would it choose? If the trees, the rivers, the birds, and the wildlife actually had a say in our economic system, it's argued they'd unanimously vote for the producer's model of coexistence over the apex predator's model of dominance.
Which leaves us with the ultimate question. We've seen how our symbols shifted from the peaceful bulls and elephants of the Indus Valley to the roaring lions of the 20th century, and how perfectly that mirrors our current extractive economy. So what's next? Will humanity continue to worship the predator's dominance, or will we finally embrace the producer's coexistence and demand a real structural shift? It's a massive question, and I really hope this explainer has given you a powerful new lens through which to view our history, our wealth, and our collective future. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.